Chuck Norris pulled his truck into the parking lot of Lincoln High School. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt, and a few students lingered near the entrance, chatting or scrolling through their phones. It was a typical Wednesday, but something about the atmosphere felt different to Chuck. Maybe it was the way the wind carried an unusual chill for this time of year, or maybe it was just his instincts kicking in. Either way, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. He stepped out of the truck, adjusting the collar of his denim jacket as he scanned the area. Chuck had promised his niece Lily that he'd pick her up early today so they could grab dinner before her karate practice. At 16, Lily was smart, kind-hearted, and full of energy. She reminded him so much of her mother, his younger sister, and he always made sure to be there for her whenever she needed him. But lately, Lily seemed distracted, quieter than usual. He figured it was just teenage stuff, but now he wondered if there was more to it. As he approached the school gates, Chuck noticed a small group of students huddled together near the entrance. They whispered nervously, glancing toward the building with worried expressions. One boy kept looking over his shoulder, as if expecting someone, or something, to appear behind him. Curiosity got the better of Chuck, and he decided to investigate. Walking past the group, he nodded politely. "Everything okay here?" he asked in a calm, steady voice. The kids exchanged uneasy looks but didn't answer. Instead, they quickly dispersed, leaving Chuck standing alone. Something strange was definitely going on. He glanced at his watch. Lily should have been waiting for him by now. Frowning, he pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside the school. The hallways were eerily quiet. Most of the classrooms were empty, their doors slightly ajar. A faint hum from the fluorescent lights above echoed through the space. Chuck moved quickly, his boots making soft thuds against the tiled floor. He knew the layout of the school well enough to find the girls' restroom without asking anyone for directions. As he turned a corner, he heard it, a muffled sob coming from down the hallway. His pace quickened. Reaching the restroom door, he hesitated for a moment before pushing it open gently. Inside, he found Lily sitting on the cold tile floor, her knees drawn up to her chest. Her face was streaked with tears, and her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. Her backpack lay discarded beside her, its contents scattered across the floor. A notebook, a water bottle, a crumpled tissue. "Lily," Chuck said softly, kneeling beside her. His deep voice filled the small room, bringing a sense of calm, despite the tension in the air. "What's wrong? What happened?" At first she didn't respond. She stared at the floor, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Chuck reached out and placed a hand on her arm, careful not to startle her. "Hey, it's me. You can tell me." Finally, she looked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with fear. "Uncle Chuck," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to do." "Take your time," he urged, his tone gentle but firm. "Start from the beginning." She took a shaky breath and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "It started a few weeks ago. I started getting these weird messages on my phone. At first I thought it was just some stupid prank, you know? Like someone trying to mess with me, but then they got worse." Chuck frowned, his protective instincts kicking into high gear. "What kind of messages?" Lily hesitated, then unlocked her phone and handed it to him. The screen lit up, revealing a series of text messages. The earliest ones were harmless. "Enough. Who are you talking to? And why are you ignoring me?" But as Chuck scrolled down, the tone shifted. The messages became more aggressive, more personal. "We're watching you. Don't think you can hide." His jaw tightened as he read the final message, sent just minutes ago. It was a photo of Lily walking into the very bathroom where they now sat. The angle of the shot suggested it had been taken from inside one of the stalls. Beneath the image, a single line of text read, "We know where you are." Chuck's blood ran cold. Whoever was behind this wasn't just playing games. They were dangerously close. He glanced around the restroom, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. but the room was empty except for the two of them. "Did you tell anyone about this?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Lily shook her head. "No, I didn't want to bother anyone. And I thought maybe I was imagining things. But today, when I got that picture," her voice broke and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't feel safe anymore, Uncle Chuck. I don't know who's doing this or why." Chuck pulled her into a tight hug, holding her close as she cried. "You did the right thing by telling me," he assured her. "This isn't your fault. Okay? We're going to figure it out together." After a moment, he pulled away and stood up, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling 911. This is serious, Lily. Someone needs to look into this right away." She nodded weakly, clutching her knees, as he dialed the number. While he waited for the operator to answer, Chuck picked up Lily's backpack and began gathering her things. His mind raced with questions. Who would target a teenager like this? And how had they managed to get so close without being seen? When the operator finally came on the line, Chuck explained the situation in clear, concise terms. "My name is Chuck Norris. I'm at Lincoln High School with my niece Lily. She's been receiving threatening messages on her phone, including photos taken inside the school. We need help figuring out who's behind this." The operator assured him that law enforcement would arrive shortly. Chuck hung up and turned back to Lily, who was still sitting on the floor looking small and vulnerable. "Help is on the way," he told her. "In the meantime, let's get you out of here." But as they left the restroom and walked back toward the main entrance, Chuck couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every step felt heavier, every shadow darker. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing, and they weren't done yet. The next morning, Chuck Norris arrived at Alex Monroe's apartment with a sense of urgency. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow through the blinds. Inside, Alex was already hard at work, his desk cluttered with wires, monitors, and empty coffee cups. His fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard as lines of code scrolled across the screen. "Anything new?" Chuck asked, closing the door behind him. Alex didn't look up immediately. He leaned closer to the monitor, squinting at something on the screen before finally turning to Chuck. "Yeah, I found something," he said, his voice low and serious. "Whoever is behind this isn't just some random hacker. They've got access to top-tier surveillance systems, stuff that's supposed to be locked down tight." Chuck frowned, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "What do you mean? Like government-level stuff?" Alex nodded. "Exactly. The metadata in those messages traces back to Project Echo. Ever heard of it?" Chuck shook his head. "It was a classified initiative designed to monitor potential threats using AI-driven surveillance," Alex explained. "But here's the kicker. It was shut down years ago after whistleblowers exposed how invasive it was. Someone must have rebooted it, and they're not using it for official purposes." Chuck's jaw tightened. "So someone's using military-grade tech to stalk teenagers?" "Looks that way," Alex replied, rubbing his temples. "And it gets worse. I dug deeper into the encryption patterns and found references to other victims. 3 other kids in town reported similar incidents over the past month. Same kind of messages, same creepy photos." Chuck's mind raced. If this was happening to multiple people, it wasn't just about Lily. There was a pattern, a method to the madness. But why target high school students? What could they possibly have that would interest someone with access to such advanced technology? "Do we know who's running this operation?" Chuck asked. Alex hesitated, scrolling through another set of data. "There's a name buried in the code. A guy named Grayson. He used to be a contractor on Project Echo before disappearing, off the grid. No one's seen or heard from him in years." "Grayson," Chuck repeated, committing the name to memory. "You think he's behind this?" "It's a good bet," Alex said. "He's got the skills, the knowledge, and now apparently the resources to pull something like this off. My guess is he's either selling the data or experimenting with psychological manipulation. Either way, it's bad news." Chuck stood up, pacing the small room. His instincts told him this wasn't just about money or power, it was personal. Someone had deliberately chosen Lily as a target, and he needed to find out why. Later that day, Chuck met Detective Ryan Carter at a quiet cafe near the precinct. The detective looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, hinting at long hours spent working the case. He greeted Chuck with a nod and slid a folder across the table. "I've been looking into those other cases you mentioned," Ryan said. 3 teenagers all receiving similar messages. One kid even claimed he saw flashes of light outside his bedroom window at night. Weird thing is, he lives on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. Chuck leaned forward, opening the folder. Inside were photographs, statements, and sketches of the incidents. Each victim described feeling like they were being watched constantly, even in places where cameras shouldn't exist. It was the same story, over and over again. "This confirms it," Chuck said grimly. "Someone's using surveillance to mess with these kids' heads, and whoever it is, they're targeting specific people for a reason." Ryan nodded. "I agree, but we still don't have enough to go on. We need evidence, something concrete that ties all this together." Chuck hesitated, then decided to share what Alex had uncovered. "There's a guy named Grayson. He used to work on a secret surveillance program called Project Echo. Someone's using that system to track these kids. If we can find him, we might be able to stop this." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Project Echo? That was shut down years ago. Are you sure about this?" "As sure as I can be," Chuck replied. "We need to track Grayson down. He's our best lead." Ryan studied Chuck for a moment, then sighed. "All right, I'll see what I can dig up on him. But if he's as dangerous as you say, we need to be careful. This isn't your average criminal." Chuck nodded. "Understood. Just let me know when you have something." That evening, Chuck returned home to find Lily curled up on the couch, flipping through channels without much interest. She looked up as he entered, forcing a smile. "Hey, Uncle Chuck." "How are you holding up?" he asked, sitting beside her. She shrugged. "Okay, I guess. Still a little freaked out, but I'm trying not to think about it." Chuck placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing great. We're going to figure this out, okay? I promise." Lily nodded, though her eyes betrayed lingering fear. "Do you think whoever's doing this will come after me again?" "We're not going to let that happen," Chuck said firmly. "I'm keeping an eye on everything. You're safe with me." After dinner, Chuck sat alone in his study, staring at the folder Ryan had given him. The pieces were starting to fit together, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Why had Grayson chosen Lily specifically? Was it because of Chuck's fame? Or was there something else connecting the victims? His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Ryan. "Found Grayson's last known address. Meet me tomorrow morning." Chuck exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. Finally, they had a lead. Tomorrow they'd confront Grayson and put an end to this once and for all. Early the next morning, Chuck met Ryan at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The air was cold and damp, and the building loomed ahead of them like a ghost. From the past, its windows were shattered, its walls covered in graffiti. It was the perfect hideout for someone like Grayson. "This is it," Ryan said, checking his gun. "Be ready for anything." Chuck nodded, his fists clenched. He wasn't armed, but he didn't need a weapon. Years of martial arts training had taught him how to handle himself in any situation. They moved cautiously inside, their footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. The interior was dimly lit, shadows dancing along the walls. Empty crates and rusted machinery littered the space, creating countless hiding spots. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence. Well, look who decided to pay me a visit." Chuck turned sharply, spotting a man stepping out from behind a stack of crates. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. This was Grayson. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," Grayson sneered. "Especially you, Chuck Norris. I figured you'd stay out of it." "What are you doing, Grayson?" Chuck demanded, his voice steady. "Why are you targeting these kids?" Grayson smirked, crossing his arms. "It's simple, really. People like you never take things seriously unless it hits close to home. So I made it personal. Thought maybe you'd appreciate the challenge." Chuck took a step forward, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "This isn't a game. You're messing with innocent lives. Innocent? Grayson laughed bitterly. Everyone has secrets, Chuck, even sweet little Lily. You'd be surprised what I've uncovered. Before Chuck could respond, Ryan stepped forward, his gun drawn. Enough talking. It's over, Grayson. Come quietly, or we'll do this the hard way. Grayson's smirk faded, replaced by a look of defiance. For a moment it seemed like he might resist. But then, slowly, he raised his hands in surrender. As Ryan cuffed him, Chuck felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had caught the man responsible, but the fight wasn't over yet. There were still questions to answer, wounds to heal, and Chuck knew he wouldn't rest until every last piece of Grayson's operation was dismantled. For now, though, Lily was safe, and that was all that mattered. Detective Ryan Carter arrived at Lincoln High School within minutes of receiving the call. He was a tall man in his late 30s with sharp blue eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. His dark brown jacket bore the faint creases of someone who spent long hours on the job, and his boots clicked against the pavement as he stepped out of his car. The school parking lot was mostly empty now, save for Chuck Norris's truck and a few faculty vehicles. As Ryan approached the entrance, he spotted Chuck standing near the doors, his arms crossed and his expression grim. "Mr. Norris," Ryan called out, extending a hand as he walked up. "I'm Detective Ryan Carter." Chuck shook his hand firmly. "Thanks for coming so quickly," he said, his voice steady but edged with concern. "My niece is inside. She's been receiving some pretty disturbing messages, and we think whoever's behind it might still be around." Ryan nodded, pulling out a small notebook from his pocket. "Can you walk me through what happened?" Chuck led him into the school, explaining everything as they went. They retraced his steps to the girls' restroom where Lily waited nervously. Her face brightened slightly when she saw the detective, though her hand still trembled as she clutched her phone. Ryan knelt down to her level, offering a reassuring smile. "Hi, Lily," he said gently. "I'm Detective Carter. I'm here to help. Can you tell me about these messages you've been getting?" Lily hesitated, glancing at Chuck for reassurance. When he gave her a small nod, she took a deep breath and began recounting the story. She described how the messages started innocently enough but grew more threatening over time. She explained how the photos seemed to show her in places where cameras shouldn't exist, like the bathroom, and how the final message sent that day had left her terrified. Ryan listened intently, jotting down notes as she spoke. When she finished, he asked to see her phone. Chuck handed it over and Ryan scrolled through the messages, his brow furrowing deeper with each one. The photo of Lily walking into the bathroom caught his attention immediately. He studied it closely, noting the angle and clarity of the shot. "This doesn't look like it was taken by a regular phone camera," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Turning to Chuck, he asked, "Did you notice anything unusual when you came in earlier? Any signs of forced entry or suspicious activity?" Chuck shook his head. The hallway was quiet. No one around except for a group of kids near the entrance. They seemed jumpy, though, like they were hiding something. Ryan made another note before standing up. "All right, let's check the security footage. If someone's been watching, Lily, there's a good chance they left some kind of trace." The three of them headed to the school's administration office, where the principal, Mrs. Dawson, greeted them with wide eyes. She was a petite woman in her 50s with graying, hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her usually calm demeanor was replaced by visible unease as she ushered them into her office. "What's going on?" she asked, wringing her hands. "Is one of our students in danger?" Ryan explained the situation briefly, assuring her that they were taking every precaution. "We just need access to your security system," he said. "Do you have recordings?" "From today?" Mrs. Dawson nodded and led them to a small room filled with monitors and control panels. A young IT technician named Sam was already there, adjusting the settings on one of the screens. He looked up as they entered, clearly startled by the sudden influx of visitors. "Sam, this is Detective Carter," Mrs. Dawson introduced. "He needs to review the footage from the hallways around the girls' restroom." Sam nodded and began pulling up the relevant feeds. Ryan leaned in, scanning the images displayed on the monitors. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Students moved through the hallways between classes. Teachers chatted near their doors, and custodians pushed carts laden with cleaning supplies. But as Sam fast-forwarded to the approximate time Lily received the final message, something odd caught Ryan's eye. "The camera's outside the restroom," Ryan said, pointing to the screen. "They cut out right before Lily went in." Sam frowned and rewound the footage. Sure enough, the feed showed the hallway leading up to the restroom, then abruptly switched to static for several minutes. When the image returned, Lily could be seen leaving the restroom, visibly upset. There was no sign of anyone else entering or exiting during the blackout period. "Is that normal?" Chuck asked, his voice low. Sam shook his head. "Not at all. Our system doesn't usually malfunction like that. If it does, we get alerts immediately." Ryan exchanged a glance with Chuck. This wasn't just bad luck. It was deliberate. Someone had tampered with the cameras to cover their tracks. The realization sent a chill through the room. "We'll need to take this equipment in for analysis," Ryan said, turning to Mrs. Dawson. "And I'd recommend increasing security measures until we figure out what's going on." Mrs. Dawson nodded vigorously, her face pale. "Of course, whatever you need." As Sam began packing up the hard drives, Ryan turned his attention back to Lily. "In the meantime, I want you to stay safe. Stick close to your family and friends, and let us know if you receive any more messages, okay?" Lily nodded, though her eyes still held a flicker of fear. "Okay." After thanking Mrs. Dawson and Sam, Ryan, Chuck, and Lily left the office and headed toward the parking lot. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Ryan stopped near his car, pulling out a business card and handing it to Chuck. "If anything else comes up, call me directly," he said. "I'll do everything I can to get to the bottom of this." Chuck accepted the card with a grateful nod. "Thanks, Detective, I appreciate it." As Ryan drove away, Chuck glanced at Lily, who was staring at the ground. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you home." Later that evening, Chuck sat at his kitchen table, Lily's phone spread out in front of him. He wasn't an expert in technology, but he knew someone who was. Picking up his own phone, he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. "Alex Monroe." "Alex, it's Chuck," he said. "I need your help." There was a pause on the other end. "Chuck Norris? Haven't heard from you in ages. What's up?" Chuck sighed, running a hand over his face. "It's my niece, Lily. She's been getting these weird messages, threats, photos, the works. Someone's stalking her, and I think they're using some kind of advanced tech to do it. I need you to take a look at her phone." Alex whistled low. "Sounds serious. Bring it over, and I'll see what I can find." Relieved, Chuck thanked him and hung up. He glanced at Lily, who was curled up on the couch watching TV. For now, she seemed distracted, but he knew the fear was still lurking beneath the surface. Whoever was doing this had gone to great lengths to invade her privacy, and Chuck couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done yet. An hour later, he arrived at Alex's apartment, a cluttered space filled with computers, gadgets, and half-empty coffee cups. Alex was a wiry man in his 40s with unkempt hair and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. Despite his disheveled appearance, he was a genius when it came to all things digital. Chuck handed him Lily's phone, explaining the situation in detail. Alex listened intently, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he connected the device to his computer. Within minutes, lines of code began scrolling across the screen. "This is interesting," Alex murmured after a while. "Whoever sent these messages didn't use a regular app or service. They routed them through encrypted channels linked to—" "Wait a second." He froze, his eyes narrowing as he zoomed in on a specific line of text. "Chuck, you're not going to believe this." "What is it?" Chuck asked, leaning closer. "These messages are embedded with metadata tied to classified military satellites. Someone hacked into secure systems to send these photos and texts." Chuck's stomach sank. Military satellites? Why would anyone go to such lengths to terrorize a high school student? Alex shook his head. "That's the million-dollar question. But whoever did this has resources and skills way beyond your average hacker. This is big league stuff. Chuck clenched his fists, his mind racing. If this was more than just a random act of harassment, then Lily wasn't the only target. Something bigger was at play here, and he needed answers. Fast. Keep digging, he told Alex. Find out everything you can about where these signals are coming from. In the meantime, I'll talk to Detective Carter. We need to figure out who's behind this before it goes any further. As he drove home, Chuck stared out the window at the darkening sky. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had faced countless challenges in his life, but this was different. This wasn't about him. It was about protecting the people he loved, and he wouldn't stop until Lily was safe. Grayson sat in the back of Detective Ryan Carter's car, his hands cuffed behind his back. His smug expression hadn't faded, even after being caught red-handed in the abandoned warehouse. Chuck Norris rode silently in the passenger seat, his fists clenched and his jaw tight. He didn't trust Grayson. Not for a second. The man had terrorized Lily and other kids, playing games with their lives as if they were pawns on a chessboard. But there was still so much they didn't know. At the police station, Grayson was led to an interrogation room. The space was small and sterile, with a single table, 2 chairs, and a large mirror that reflected the fluorescent lights above. Chuck stood outside the room, watching through the glass as Ryan took a seat across from Grayson. Despite everything, Grayson looked almost amused, leaning back in his chair like he didn't have a care in the world. "Let's cut to the chase," Ryan began, resting his elbows on the table. "Who else is involved in this? You didn't pull this off alone." Grayson smirked. "You're smarter than you look, Detective. But I'm not saying a word without my lawyer." Ryan leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "This isn't just some petty crime we're talking about. You used classified military tech to stalk teenagers. That makes you a very dangerous man, and one who's going to spend a long time behind bars." Grayson shrugged, unfazed. "Prove it. All you've got is circumstantial evidence. Without me, you'll never find the rest of the operation." Chuck clenched his fists, resisting the urge to storm into the room. He hated how calm Grayson seemed, like he was still in control. But Chuck knew better. They had him now, and sooner or later, they'd get the truth out of him. Meanwhile, Alex Monroe continued digging into Project Echo from his apartment. The deeper he went, the more disturbing the details became. It wasn't just surveillance. Grayson had been selling real-time feeds of people's private lives to the highest bidder. Criminals, corporations, even foreign governments had paid top dollar for access to the data, and the victims weren't random. Each one had been carefully selected based on criteria Alex couldn't yet decipher. He called Chuck late that night, his voice tense. "I found something big." Grayson wasn't just experimenting with psychological manipulation. He was building a black market network. People could pay to spy on anyone they wanted. Friends, family, rivals, anything they wanted to see Grayson delivered. Chuck felt sick to his stomach. This wasn't just about scaring kids, it was about exploiting their vulnerabilities for profit. Why target teenagers, though? What's the connection? That's the part I'm still working on, Alex admitted. But I think it has something to do with testing the limits of the system. Teenagers are easier targets. They're less likely to report strange behavior or fight back. If Grayson could break them, he could prove his system worked on anyone. Chuck ended the call, his mind racing. Every new piece of information made the situation worse. Grayson wasn't just a criminal. He was a predator, preying on the innocent to satisfy his own greed. And Lily had been caught in the crossfire. The next day, Ryan called Chuck with an update. "We searched Grayson's place last night, found a bunch of encrypted files on his computer. Tech guys are working on decrypting them now, but it's slow going. In the meantime, we've got enough to charge him with illegal surveillance and harassment." "That's good," Chuck said, though his tone was heavy. "But it's not enough. We need to shut down the entire operation. If Grayson sold access to others, there could be more victims out there." "I agree," Ryan replied. "But we can't do that until we know who else is involved. Grayson's not talking, and his lawyer is stonewalling us. For now, all we can do is wait." Chuck hung up, frustration bubbling inside him. Waiting wasn't something he was good at. Not when Lily's safety was on the line. He decided to visit her at home, hoping to lift her spirits. She had been quieter than usual, spending most of her time in her room or staring blankly at the TV. When he arrived, she was sitting on the couch, hugging her knees to her chest. Her eyes lit up slightly when she saw him, but the fear was still there, lingering beneath the surface. "Hey, sweetheart," Chuck said, sitting beside her. "How are you feeling?" She shrugged. "Okay, I guess, just tired of thinking about it." "I know," Chuck said gently. "But listen to me. Grayson's in custody now. He can't hurt you anymore." Lily nodded, though her gaze remained distant. "What happens next?" "We keep working to make sure no one else gets hurt," Chuck replied. "That's what matters most." Later that evening, Alex called again, excitement in his voice. "I cracked one of the encrypted files. It's a list of clients, people who paid Grayson for access to the surveillance system. Some of the names are big shots, politicians, CEOs, even a few celebrities. Do any of them stand out?" Chuck asked. "There's one name that keeps coming up," Alex said. "A guy named Victor Lang. He's a tech billionaire with ties to defense contractors. From what I can tell, he funded Grayson's operation in exchange for exclusive access to the system." Chuck's blood ran cold. "So Lang is the mastermind behind all this?" "Looks that way," Alex replied. "If we can tie him to Grayson, we might be able to bring the whole thing crashing down." Chuck thanked Alex and immediately called Ryan. "We've got a lead. A guy named Victor Lang. He's the one pulling the strings." Ryan let out a low whistle. "Lang? Are you sure?" "As sure as we can be," Chuck said. "Alex found his name in Grayson's files. If we go after him, we can shut this down for good." Ryan hesitated. "Going after someone like Lang won't be easy. He's got money, power, and connections. If we make a move, we need to be careful." "I understand," Chuck said, "but we don't have a choice. Not if we want to stop this once and for all." The following morning, Chuck and Ryan met at the precinct to plan their next steps. They knew Lang wouldn't go down without a fight, but they also knew they couldn't let him continue using innocent people as pawns in his twisted game. With Grayson's files as evidence, they began building a case against him. As they worked, Chuck thought about Lily and the other victims. This wasn't just about catching criminals, it was about protecting the vulnerable, giving them a chance to live without fear. And no matter how powerful Lang was, Chuck refused to back down. By the end of the day, they had a solid strategy in place. Tomorrow, they would confront Lang and put an end to his empire of surveillance and exploitation. Chuck felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were closer than ever to justice. The next morning, Chuck Norris and Detective Ryan Carter stood outside the towering office building of Victor Lang's tech company. The glass facade reflected the city skyline, gleaming in the early sunlight. It was a symbol of wealth and power, but to Chuck, it felt cold and hollow. Behind those polished windows lay a man who had turned surveillance into a weapon, a tool to invade lives and exploit vulnerabilities. "Ready for this?" Ryan asked, adjusting his tie as they approached the entrance. Chuck nodded, his expression grim. "Let's get it over with." Inside, the lobby was sleek and modern, with marble floors and a high ceiling. A receptionist greeted them with a polite smile. "How may I assist you?" "We're here to see Victor Lang," Ryan said, showing his badge. "It's urgent." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone, speaking softly before turning back to them. "Mr. Lang will see you in his office, top floor." As they stepped into the elevator, Chuck glanced at Ryan. "You think he knows why we're here?" Ryan shrugged. "Hard to say, but if he's as smart as everyone says, he probably has an idea." Victor Lang's office was a stark contrast to the sterile lobby. The room was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Lang himself sat behind a large desk, dressed in an expensive suit that matched his confident demeanor. He rose to greet them, extending a hand with a practiced smile. "Detective Carter, Mr. Norris," he said smoothly. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Ryan didn't bother with pleasantries. We're investigating a series of illegal surveillance operations linked to your company. We believe you've been using classified technology to spy on private citizens. Lang's smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Chuck stepped forward, his voice low and steady. We know about Project Echo, and we know you funded Grayson's operation. This isn't just about spying. It's about selling people's lives to the highest bidder. Lang's composure slipped slightly, his eyes narrowing. I don't know what you're talking about. If there's been any wrongdoing, it wasn't sanctioned by me or my company. Ryan placed a folder on the desk, opening it to reveal copies of Grayson's encrypted files. These documents link you directly to Grayson, payments, communications, everything. You're done, Lang. For a brief moment, Lang looked cornered. Then, almost imperceptibly, his lips curled into a smirk. Even if that's true, and I'm not admitting anything, you'll never prove it. My lawyers will tear your case apart. Chuck clenched his fists, resisting the urge to act. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice firm. Maybe. But we're not leaving until we shut this down completely. No more victims, no more secrets. Lang's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. For all his wealth and influence, he couldn't deny the evidence staring him in the face. Back at the precinct, the team worked tirelessly to build their case against Lang. Grayson's files provided the smoking gun they needed, tying him to every aspect of the operation. Meanwhile, Alex Monroe continued analyzing the data, uncovering even more victims whose lives had been invaded without their knowledge. Chuck spent hours reviewing the information, his heart heavy with each new revelation. Teenagers, families, professionals, all had been watched, recorded, and sold off like commodities. It was a violation of privacy on a scale he could barely comprehend. Lily called him later that evening, her voice hesitant. Uncle Chuck, is it really over? Are they going to stop him? Chuck sighed, sitting down on the couch. We're doing everything we can, sweetheart. Lang won't be able to hurt anyone else after this. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What happens now? Now we focus on healing, Chuck replied. You've been through a lot, but you're stronger than you think, and I'm here for you every step of the way. Lily's voice softened. Thanks, Uncle Chuck. I don't know what I'd do without you. Chuck smiled faintly. You'll never have to find out. The following week, the story broke in the media. News outlets covered the scandal extensively, exposing Lang's involvement in the illegal surveillance network. Public outrage grew as details emerged about how far-reaching the operation had been. Within days, Lang's empire began to crumble. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up, and his once sterling reputation was tarnished beyond repair. Grayson, meanwhile, struck a deal with prosecutors in exchange for testifying against Lang. His testimony sealed Lang's fate, ensuring he would face justice for his crimes. At the courthouse, Chuck watched as Lang was led away in handcuffs, his head bowed in defeat. It was a small victory, but one that brought some measure of closure. Still, Chuck knew the damage couldn't be undone overnight. The victims would carry the scars of this ordeal for years to come. One evening, Chuck joined Lily for dinner at her favorite restaurant. She seemed lighter, her usual spark returning little by little. Over burgers and fries, she talked about school, her friends, and plans for the future. You seem happier, Chuck observed, smiling. I am, Lily admitted. Knowing that guy can't hurt anyone anymore. It helps. Thanks for everything. Uncle Chuck, seriously. Chuck reached across the table, squeezing her hand. I promised I'd protect you, didn't I? That's a promise I intend to keep. As they left the restaurant, the city lights shimmered around them. For the first time in weeks, Chuck felt a sense of peace. They had faced something dark and dangerous together, and they had come out stronger on the other side. But as they walked to the car, Chuck reminded her of something important. No matter what happens, remember this. You're never alone. Not while I'm around. Lily grinned, hugging him tightly. I know, and I'm lucky to have you. Chuck hugged her back, feeling grateful for the bond they shared. The fight might be over, but his role as her protector would never change. Together, they drove home under the stars, ready to face whatever came next.